Our planking is progressing right along. We only have 3 broad strakes left to go. Well, now that we've planked down to around the bilge here, we're having to do a process that's called backing out. And backing out is making it so that this board can curve this way as addition to the fore and aft. So if I show you in this drawing, so what we have here is this would be the frame and this would be the previous plank. So we need to take the planking stock that would be here and we need to hollow it out like this. And we'll do that with a hollowing plane that I had made in the previous episode. So one of the critical things that we need to determine is the thickness of the plank stock that we need to prepare. And in order to do that, we need to know that our plank is a 1/2 inch, and we want to keep this to be the 1/2 inch dimension. And this is where the full stock would be. So what we need to do is determine what this amount here is and add that to a 1/2 inch so that we know that that will be what the finished dimension of our planking stock should be. So if we look here at our frame, and we can see that I've drawn this line here, and if we measure that, it measures about 3/16 of an inch. So what we need to do is add 3/16 to a 1/2 inch, which gives us 11/16. So we'll need to prepare some planking stock that is 11/16 inch thick. The first thing we need to do, though, is to get a spiling batten on here and spile this plank. Now that we've got our plank prepared, we can get ready to do that backing out. Now, if there's anything in that previous segment that you'd like to explain further, I invite you to check out the carvel planking playlist. All of it will be explained in detail. So let's get this plank over by the boat and start backing out. First thing that I want to do is to transfer all of these frame positions to the back of the plank. So the first thing we want to do is to get our contour plane set up. So the way that this works is, in order to loosen the iron, you would tap here, and that'll loosen up the iron. like so, and the wedge. So in order to get it set up to start with, you'd set it on a flat surface and let the iron set there even with that, and then to put the wedge in and press that in like so. Give it a couple of taps. And then try and see how the bottom feels. And I can tell that it protrudes just a little bit, so give it a try. That's pretty good. Now, if for some reason I wanted it to protrude a little bit more, I would tap the iron here, like that. We'll see if that digs just a little deeper. It does. If I had it too deep, then I would tap on this button here. And that's basically, Newton's law of every action, there's a reaction. So by forcing down here, it forces the iron back out. So that's how you adjust a plane. It would be any kind of a wooden hand plane like that. That's how it's adjusted. So our next step, now that we have our plane adjusted, is to determine the curve of the frame and how we transfer that to the plank. Now there are a couple of ways to do that. The one way is with a contour gauge. And I've had this old gauge for a long time. I think I got it back when I was still in high school. I don't know that they even make them like this one anymore, but I do know that there are brands that are very similar. And essentially it's called a contour gauge. And it has these little pins so that when you set it on here, you can then press these pins in, like so. And that will then copy that contour there. So then what we would do, we would use the other side of it to then measure here on the plank at that station mark. So we would know how much material to take out. Now, short of buying a contour gauge, the other way is to simply to make a little pattern. So what I did was I took a piece of plywood and let it on here and drew a line and cut it out. And you can see here that I have the contour of this frame recorded on this piece of plywood. I then took that piece and re-recorded it on the top side of it so that I would have not just the concave, but the convex surface. So then the convex surface I can use to gauge here on the plank. I went by and checked all of them, and the curve on these stays pretty consistent all the way down to frame 10. So I'm going to use this little wood block because it's a little quicker, and that way, once I get down to 10, I can use the other gauge where they change a little more drastically down to about station 5, where it's virtually almost flat. So we'll get started at the transom and start planing out the board. Pretty good. Now that I have it planed pretty much all the way down, I've been taking this sanding block that I had cut a piece of foam on the same curve that the frames are. And so by using this, I can then level out those little ridges that are in there and smooth it down. One of the most important parts of doing this is making sure that the curve is all the way from one edge of the board to the other edge of the board. Because if that curve comes up and then it flattens out right at the edges, that will not make the two planks fit together very evenly. Because the idea is that inside, if I were to run my finger across there from one plank to the other, that they would be all at the same level. And if there's a little bit of a flat spot, I would be able to feel that. So by taking my gauge, my template here, and checking that, I can see that it's going all the way out to the edge. Well, I've offered up this plank to the boat, and you can see we have that 3/16 of an inch sticking up. So what we need to do is turn our attention to shaping the outside of the plank now. Now, the previous plank did not require quite as much backing out. So once I had it fastened to the boat, I took a piece of 1/2 inch planking scrap and I scribed a line on the bottom side of the plank. And then with my hand plane, I planed that down. Then I did that on the top side also, where it met, so that these two planks met. So what I'm going to do with this plank is I'm going to scribe a 1/2 inch line on there, and then I'm going to power plane the majority of it off on the flat sawhorses. Well, that is a pretty good fit. I'm going to leave this on the boat overnight so it kind of can relax itself in there, and then I'll fasten it down. Well, it's been just a little over a year that I got started on the boat, and recently I went back and rewatched all of this season. I'd like to invite you, if you're new to the channel or if you've been with me for a while, to do the same thing. It's a great way to get caught up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.